the first author is Ralph Salazar, and he's a major in the United States Army, and his work was done under the supervision of Professor Rutkowski at Texas A&M, and I'm presenting. So I find it a very interesting topic, and it's interesting for me because it has potential of extending our network of our set of project production systems to military operations. Yeah. So, and I think it does. So to get to that, I want to go through what Ralph said first. Okay, and what he's talking about is the question: can lean be applied in military organizations, right? And he makes a distinction between what he calls stateside and war side. So he's, in this paper, he's looking at applicability to military functions, if you will, that are not under combat conditions, but maintaining the readiness and so forth for combat. I have some thoughts about applying it to combat. So I hope, if I have time, I'll share it. But first, Ralph. Okay? So there has been a call for, and this is even some years ago, for the application of lean in the United States military. And I need to read that for you. Okay? I think here's the most interesting, it's the emphasis here is on the lines involved: ensure all views are welcome to the debate and that junior leaders have no fear of severe retribution for freely stating their opinions. This doesn't sound like kind of a classical view of a military organization, right? Here's some more evidence, as the heading says, that the U.S. Army wants to implement lean. So, Department of Defense directive, establishing continuous improvement, process improvement at Lean Six Sigma programs. And then Dr. Doc Whitaker, the head of the U.S. Army Medical Command, has done this development of a certified Lean Six Sigma leader. So at least on that dimension that they're moving. Now here he makes his distinction between stateside and wartime Army. I've already explained it. So here's what he's looking at here is the applicability of the Toyota Way principles to the stateside Army. Right? And he says that he's looked at all of them apply, but seven of them he thinks apply without argument. These seven he discusses are those of the other seven. Right? So here we go. Long-term philosophy. And here on the compatibility column, he says war side, stateside. War side low, stateside high. Make decisions slowly, medium, grow leaders with thorough understanding of philosophy, low, medium, develop exceptional people in teams, high. So already there are some applications to both war side and stateside, but less on the war side. He did cite some evidence in support of those assessments. So, Become a Learning Organization says they have after-action reviews with questions, a kind of five-wise drill down as a routine method for learning from their experience. And then the bottom is an interesting one. It says feedback from the group begins with the lower ranking members first to prevent them being overshadowed by more senior ranking officers. And so they're trying to get to this condition where, I will share an example of this later, where you take off your bars when you come into a room, right? And that doesn't apply just to the military. There are a lot of bars that are only in titles. Standardized tasks and processes. competencies, that seems to be very strong in the military. And he mentions in the bottom here that one of the benefits of standardization is the ability for people to move from one unit or location placement to another and fit in easily because they understand what they find. They're doing the work the same way in every place. It's more of the same. Here's an interesting one that I think, again, doesn't apply only to the military. There are occasions when the new commander decides to make sweeping changes to the design, resulting in significant delays and cost overruns due to change orders and rework. Do you think that happens outside the military? Okay. And the countermeasure here says if a design decision rests with the team as a party value design, it is much harder for the new boss to overturn. So it could be, in Deming's phrase, continuity of purpose. Conclusion. They're doing it. Right? That's the fundamental conclusion. And he thinks, he again repeats this distinction between stateside and warside. Now, let me, I stumbled across, I think my colleague Greg Howell actually found this. There's a chief of staff for Bismarck, von Moltke, I think his name was, who, this is like 1870, right, said that no plan, however well contrived, withstands the first contact with the enemy.
Helmut von Moltke.
Moltke, thank you. A student of military history. Okay, and then there's another saying that I don't know who made it up, but I certainly used it. Maybe I made it up. If you can't say no, you can't make a promise. Right? And so the question then, the really fundamental question about the applicability of lean to the military side of military organizations is, how can they do that? Right? How can they do that? And so I'd like to make, let me share one other thing here that you may or may not know about. This is now about 10 years old, but the military commissioned a strategy document called Power to the Edge. And what they recognized was that, and this again was in a different context in the Iraqi War, the U.S.ARMY had to adopt this kind of power to the edge philosophy, if you will, in order to get out of Iraq alive. And so power to the edge was the idea that instead of having everyone at the front, battalions at the front, phone back to the Pentagon for instructions, which is of course ludicrous, but not so far from reality, that they would focus on giving clear direction in terms of objectives and strategy, but empower the people at the front to actually figure out what's the best way to achieve those objectives. They're in contact with the enemy, right? Okay? And then they also promoted the use of information technology to link together the various points of contact with that enemy so that you could make a better strategic decision for using your forces, right? So, I'll tell you a quick story. How much time do I have?
15 seconds.
Okay, a lot. Okay, another quick story. This is from Greg Howell, who was a naval engineering commander in the Vietnam War. Okay, so he has some experience. And he reported that one of the captains under which he worked, he was a lieutenant commander, I think, one of the captains under which he worked had the practice of, and this was at warside, they were in a fight. Right? Not immediately in the fight, but when they had time, they would come together, badges off, or insignia off, literally off in a bowl, and Captain what's-his-name illustrated time and time again that he really meant it. Right? So you could criticize his thoughts and ideas just as much as you could criticize anybody else. So I think that applies the fundamental of lean in wartime operations. But if we think about, well, when would you have to give an order rather than make a request? It seems to me there are two features to that. One is when you don't have time. Right? If you see someone stepping into traffic, you say, I'd like to suggest that. You don't. You act. Right? And the other is when you're asking people to put their life at risk. Right? And so and their hesitation might be an occasion for other people putting their life at risk. Okay? So I think that there's, and just one other piece, I'm not trying to solve a problem, but to say this is a really interesting space. The other piece comes out of the theory of high-performance teams, which has this notion of situational leadership. So rank doesn't matter when you're in a fight. It's who has the capability of making the best decision in the moment. Right? And I think that is also a lead. Thank you.
We have a couple of minutes for questions